And welcome to the Canes Corner podcast. I am Adam Gold. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. You see it there on the screen. If it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. Everything from windows to siding to gutters to roofing. We're gonna do windows and a door and two doors. Anyway, aluminumcompany.com. Feels like it has been a long summer. I don't know if it has or hasn't. I do know that we are a month away from getting everything underway. Training camp's about a month away. The rookie prospect showcase is September 13th through the 16th. We're waiting. We're on Seth Jarvis contract watch. Also waiting to see Alexander Nikishin's latest season in the KHL. Maybe, hopefully, the last season in the KHL. And I can't think of a better person to talk to. And it will be our first time having a serious conversation, although you know me, how serious is it ever going to be? Darren Yorke, Associate General Manager of the Carolina Hurricanes and General Manager of the Chicago Wolves. First time you and I have had, I guess, a professional conversation. I nod to you a lot on the concourse on the fifth floor PNC Arena. But first time that you and I are, at least virtually, sitting down. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get to a couple of things. I want to start with Jarvis. And unless you're willing to break any news here about a Seth Jarvis 8-year contract extension, my understanding is it's close. Do you want to break any news before I ask you about Seth the player?
Yeah, I don't think I'm in the business to be an insider, but I as it's been reported, and I think Eric has mentioned this publicly as well. Everyone wants the same thing, and to have Seth Jarvis in a Carolina Hurricanes jersey for as long as possible.
Yeah, and at least we're going to start with 8 years. I want to read from Corey Pronman's, who works for The Athletic. He's their prospect guy at The Athletic. I want to read from him about Seth. It probably sums it up as well as anything possibly could. Plays in all situations, is an easy player to like due to his speed and skill, but especially due to his work ethic. He's not a big guy, but Jarvis wins a ton of puck battles and plays with courage. Does that sound like an accurate description of Seth Jarvis to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Carolina Hurricanes fans have seen it now for a few years, the ability of him, and we're looking forward to getting the contract behind us and having him not to have to worry about this for a long time.
So he can pay off that Volkswagen Tiguan he was teasing Aho about. It's like, hey, I got to pay off a car. You just signed a $9.75 million deal, although Seth will be able to buy multiple cars. I'm sure. He 5'10", 175 pounds now as he's listed. And he's in great shape. Last time we saw Seth, he played an entire season with a torn labrum. I don't think people understand just how difficult that is, that he had to deal with that all season long, and he got better as the season went on. When you scouted him, what were the things that made you believe that he could be? And I don't know if you thought this is what he could be, and I think there's better even for Seth coming, but what were the things that jumped out to you about Seth as a player, maybe even beyond what Corey wrote in The Athletic?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's transferred incredibly seamlessly from him playing junior hockey to playing in the NHL is his ability to drive the net. I think you watched him, albeit in a shortened season, just constantly get to the net. It didn't matter the size of the player that he was going against. He was able to put him on his back and get leverage on him. So it's a combination of his hockey sense. It's a combination of his skating. It's a combination of his fearlessness. And all of those transferred incredibly quickly to the NHL. Like, we have to remember, he unfortunately didn't make the World Junior team and then goes into the AHL and almost puts up a point a game at being 19 years old, doing the exact same thing. And that fearlessness, that competitiveness that he's shown in the NHL, he did that in Chicago as well.
Yeah, and he was also drafted in the COVID year, right? So you guys had There was I don't
The
no
year got
AHL that year, right?
yeah, they played I think it was 50 or 48 some odd games that he played because the season got canceled in mid-March.
I mean, there were so many challenges there, and he was at a point where you could send him back to junior, but what was that going to do for him? And as it turned out, the following season he was good enough to make the team. He was one of those players, and we're going to get to it at the prospect tournament. And I think that year, the prospect tournament was in Florida, where he was one of those players that was so good. You went, yeah, he's got a good chance to make the team. And I just remember everybody raving about him. That fearlessness that you talk about, is it also in some ways worrisome is not the right word, because like, are you a dog owner?
I am.
Okay, so I am too. We have a corgi, and we have a Weimaraner. Corgi is kind of small, thick, wide, short legs. Weimaraner, tall legs, athlete. He's like little dog thinks he's a big dog. And I love that about him. But I think at the same time, I think everybody is always a little worried that, somebody's going to try to take his head off.
Yeah. Honestly, no, I'm not worried about it at all. He needs to play like that to have success. There's no I think anytime if you're doing anything in life and you're a little bit hesitant, you're a little fearful of it, you're not going to excel to the best that you can.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to make a decision because of the market conditions, it's probably not going to go as well as you may think to do it, because you're going to miss out on that timing. So the way that he plays, he has to play in this fearlessness, this speed, and the hole's going to open. He's smart enough to see it, and he drives the net, and that's going to allow him to continue to have success for a long time.
Like, he doesn't have any fear, like zero fear. It's one of the things that makes him great. It's one of the things that, I mean, in some ways, and like, you've been in the organization for 16 years, so you remember the early Jeff Skinner. And I think Jeff Skinner early in his career played like the middle of the ice was no issue at all for Jeff Skinner. And it's clear, like, he's 5-0 and he stands in front of the net. He is the guy standing in front of the net on the power play, among all the other things that he does. He's just an absolute pleasure to watch. He's a fan favorite. I mean, you know him. His personality just adds to the whole mix. I think his personality actually makes him better.
Yeah, he's as authentic as you can be. He's obviously great for the guys to be around. He can be serious when he needs to be. He can be jokeful. Guys want to be around. He's got a very infectious personality.
Yeah, I've never seen him serious, to be perfectly honest, ever at any point, and I don't want to. I think the personality, certainly as a marketing, and I mean, I could probably talk to Doug Worf about this, but I mean, he's got to be an absolute dream to have. And what do you have? Did you think he would be this?
In terms of what the personality, or you're talking about?
No, I probably should have clarified this in terms of the player that he is. Because, like, he's a top line player on a championship caliber team for me. And
I think everyone was excited with the possibilities of what he can become. Yeah, he was able to score at an elite level at the WHL, and he did it for multiple years. You put him in any different situation, and he continued to adapt. I know you acknowledged this prospect tournament that he had, and it seemed like every single time he touched the puck, it was going to go in. It hasn't seemed like a level that he hasn't been able to reach when he was trying to take it up towards the NHL. So great for Seth to continue to raise the bar.
Yeah, so just reverting back to Corey Pronman's piece in The Athletic, where it has the Hurricanes ranked 12th in the pipeline rankings. Jarvis, because he's 22, is still on the list. And I think people will be surprised, and maybe this is a sign of things to come, that he is not the number one prospect on that pipeline. It is Alexander Nikishin, the defenseman who was playing at SKA St. Petersburg this year, one more year, hopefully just one more year. The KHL I've alluded to is just kind of different. What are your thoughts on Nikishin? He was a third-round pick, so it's not like he was, the fourth pick in the draft. What did you see in him then, and what are your thoughts on what kind of player he can become?
Yeah, I think going back to his draft year, he split time between the KHL and the MHL, and he was playing two different styles of games, and depending on what league he was in. At the MHL level, you saw the ability to carry the puck and be, offensive, and on the KHL side, you saw this physical, hard to play against defensive first defenseman. He showed the ability to play fast defensively and really everything that we want out of our defenseman. You just didn't see some of the offensive elements to his game, which is somewhat expected when you're 18 years old playing against men. And fast forward a few years, you're seeing more of that offensive ability become more consistent, the ability to open up space on the offensive zone blue line and show that deception. At the same point, you got all the Twitter highlights, his ability to be hard to play against. Like he's mean, he's nasty, and he can score. So we're obviously incredibly excited to get him over to be a Carolina Hurricanes defenseman, and looking at a defenseman that may be that unicorn.
Yeah, look, I know former Hurricanes GM Don Waddell was asked at the press conference to announce Rod Brindamore's contract extension. I didn't realize that they were trying to see if they could get him over here early. Obviously, that's not happening. But what are are you positive that he could maybe even be an option when their season comes to an end, which is like April, depending on where Carolina is in a playoff race?
Yeah, obviously the soonest we can get him over here, that's what everything we'll do, whatever we can to get him over here. So depending on how long their season goes and everything that goes into getting a contract done and getting a visa done, we're going to do everything possibly we can to get him over to Raleigh as quick as possible.
I mean, I think everybody's excited. Can you do you do comps? Like who would he comp as a who do you comp him to?
Alexander Nikishin. I don't know if it's fair to say that he can be so and so or he resembles so and so. He's his own person. He's right. An incredibly gifted player in terms of if it's helpful for the fans who haven't seen him, haven't watched him. He has a blend of nastiness to make the big open ice hit, and you can give him a one-timer and you can put a top corner. It's such a blend of talent that he's really just his own individual person.
I don't even know if this matters, but former Hurricanes, Yevgeny Kuznetsov, Hurricane, only one. Yevgeny Kuznetsov is playing on that team. Has there been any communication with Yevgeny about Nikishin? Do you anticipate some sort of line of communication about how he's doing?
We just can watch and talk to him directly. So we haven't talked to Evgeny Kuznetsov, but we'll obviously just talk to the player, no different with our current development process when we sit and we meet with our players virtually if we can't get there in person.
Very cool. Does he speak any English at this point? Not that should matter because A, it doesn't matter, and B, there are plenty of guys who could help him in the locker room anyway at this point.
Yeah, he can a little bit, and obviously we'll continue to work with him to get it as better. Obviously, the sooner he's able to learn English, it makes a transition a little bit easier for him.
Makes it easier for me to get him on the podcast. Darren Yorke, the Associate General Manager for the Carolina Hurricanes, also GM of the Chicago Wolves. So let's just talk about this prospect showcase. It's called. I guess it's in Nashville, suburban Nashville. The 13th through the 16th of September. Bradley Nadeau is going to be there. Felix Unger-Sorm is going to be there. Scott Morrow is going to be there. When you watch something like this, how are you? Are you looking at it? I know you look at it long term. These are how what our guys look like. And by the way, Skylar Brindamore is going to be there in a Hurricane sweater, so that's cool. I know Rod will be out there. What are your thoughts on what to expect from some of these players, especially those guys that are closer to the NHL?
Yeah, it's really more process driven than results driven. I know you alluded to long term. It's really evaluating them where they are based off that tournament. What are the things that we have asked them to work on from development standpoints, and seeing how that compares to other players who are at a very similar timeline. For the guys that are playing, CHL hockey, it's obviously a much higher pace and playing against men. So that's an understanding of, or a checkpoint to see how they're adapting. For the players that are a little bit closer to the NHL, you're obviously hoping that they are able to show the same assets that they showed at a lower level. And then it's also a stepping stone for them to be ready come NHL training camp and NHL preseason games, that they've already had 3 games under their belt.
So for a guy like multiple players, and I don't know how the organization views the readiness, or whether you guys rank the guys who have a chance to maybe make the Hurricanes roster, but a Bradley Nadeau, a Jackson Blake, maybe not so much a Scott Morrow, since it does seem that barring injury, there are at least 6 bona fide NHL defensemen. But there might be a spot for maybe there are spots for multiple spots for young players. Do you need to see Bradley or Jackson or anybody essentially dominate for 3 games before that even enters the picture?
I don't know if I'd classify it like that, because if to that point, if they didn't and then they dominated a preseason game, which one are you going to weigh a little bit more than the other?
Sure.
So again, this is really, it's less about the results in terms of whether or not they score 3 goals or 0 goals. It's more about what we have communicated with them in terms of working on their development to get them to the NHL, and how exactly that goes in that tournament with the little things that we're asking them to do. And really, it's on them in terms of the process and getting comfortable and getting up to speed with what we're asking them to do to improve upon that in the tournament, to training camp and the drills, to the preseason games. And then ultimately it's on their performance throughout that time and what they've done in the past to see if they can earn a spot in the NHL.
Darren Yorke is with us, Associate General Manager of the Carolina Hurricanes. It looks to me, as with your role as also GM of the Chicago Wolves, that they're going to have a stacked lineup this year, a ton of prospects. How many prospects do you think will be, suiting up for the Wolves? I assume it'll be kind of supplemented by some, veteran players who have played a lot in the AHL and NHL. But how many prospects do you think you'll have there?
Yeah, well, we'll have quite a few. Obviously, remains to be seen how the NHL roster shakes out. But it's going to be, again, you've alluded to the Corey Promen's, prospect ranking, and the ones that don't make the NHL that are signed are going to be in Chicago. And it's an exciting time to be a Carolina Hurricanes fan with the depth of prospects that we have. At the same point, we've been able to consistently make the playoffs, and that's not something that you usually see. So I think it's really allows us to position to have success over the long run.
I also, and I've talked about this before, the fact that, last year obviously wasn't the case, but in the past, you've been able to have more control over how that team played. Not just who played, but how it played. So even if you just had a handful of prospects there, they're playing the way you guys want to play. That has to be a major asset to them when they do come up to the NHL. They're familiar with the system.
For sure. I think it's a prerequisite when we have our affiliation. They play the exact same system that the NHL team plays. And again, you want to make sure that the athletes are put in the best position to have success. So if they're playing a more passive system in the AHL and they get called up and they got to play aggressive, they're going to be hesitant. They're going to be slow. You're not putting them in a position to have success. So it's the system that Cam runs is going to be the exact same system that Rod runs. And it's really designed no differently, probably any other AHL franchise is designed to put the players in the best possible position to have success when they get called up.
All right, just a few more things, and I know you have a busy life, not just a busy day, but a busy life, as a lot of us do. But so I don't want to monopolize your time. But just to get back to prospects that are going to be in Nashville and will be in training camp with a chance to make the team, what kind of chance do you give a Nadeau or a Blake or an Unger Sorum or any one of these players? What kind of chance do you give them to impress enough to make the team?
Yeah, I think as an organization, we've been very consistent with we'll do whatever it takes to get better. So if there is opportunities and for these players to go out and earn the job, and if they clearly do it, we'll make room for them. So I don't know if I'm going to sit here and quantify a number that Brad or Ungersorm or whoever has X percentage chance to make the team. If they go out and earn the job, we'll find room for any player that can make the Carolina Hurricanes better.
I was really hoping that you would say that Bradley Nadeau has a 37% chance of of making the roster. I wanted to ask you about the organizational philosophy. Not having spoken to you directly about this, or Tom Dundon, who I speak to regularly, about the philosophy, it's easy to read into some patterns. Patterns of late first round pick and a early second round pick are essentially the same, and because to the organization's philosophy, if we can compile more assets by trading back for what we value is the same thing, then we're going to do that. More value there. Obviously, you guys see a market inefficiency with players playing in Russia. Can you walk me through what some of that philosophy is? How accurate is what I just said, by the way?
Yeah, let's make it incredibly simple. We're just trying to find the best players that you can't go acquire elsewhere. So I know you alluded to, and we have drafted a little bit more Russian players than maybe the market has over the last few years. But we're not going into building our list and saying, okay, we're going to be able to get this player here or that player there because of their passport. We very simply rank the players based off of how we view them. And it just so happens that we may not have any biases that some other teams may have over age or size or passport. And if that's the case, they appear to be higher on our list. And that's just how we end up drafting them.
So is it harder to scout Russian players? Because I don't have to say anything else other than that. Is it harder to scout Russian players? It's clear that you guys fancied players who are from there more than most. I mean, I think of the 10 players you drafted, six Russians? I mean, I'm not against it at all. I want the best players too. So is it harder to scout them?
Well, it's hard in the sense that if you're going to Russia, you got to get, a visa. If you go to Finland and you got a Canadian or American passport, you don't. But if you want to watch video of the players, you can pull up the video just as easily if they're from Russia or if they're from Canada. Again, we try to utilize every bit of technology that we can to give us as much information about the players as possible. We try to ensure that irrespective of where the player is playing, that multiple people have seen them and they get lots of different opinions on the style of play. And if that allows us to make it easier, again, regardless of where the player is, then so be it.
All right, final question, final opportunity for maybe you to pat yourself or your staff on the back, because there's clearly a number of prospects coming. Scott Morrow will be here either sometime this year, maybe at the beginning of this year. But again, there's 6 NHL defensemen on the roster. Legit, I mean, I think you could argue that there's 6 top 4 NHL defensemen on the roster based on how certain guys have played. Are there prospects that you think about that you're particularly proud of your staff at identifying that maybe fell through the cracks?
Yeah, I've been I've been asked that question before, and I answered the same way. It's always going to be the next one. I don't want to single out any one player. I think, and you're right. We have an incredible staff. We ask the scouts to do a lot in terms of not just missing time with their families, but in terms of the expectations from the reports and the work that they do, and they just want more. So we really do have an amazing staff, and they're all driven to find the next one. So as we continue to build and have success in this organization, the goal is to continue to climb up those prospect rankings with as many different players as possible, and that's only going to yield to sort of have more success over the long run. So then the next Scott Morrow, the next Bradley Nadeau, the next Alexander Nikishin, that's the goal, to find one each and every year to continue to have success. And I'm incredibly thankful for the staff that we have, because they're all so driven to get better each and every day.
The next Seth Jarvis, the next 8-year contract guy. Darren Yorke, Associate General Manager, GM of the Chicago Wolves. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I'll do more than nod on press row next time I see you.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Adam.